You've just unlocked access to some incredible memories. Isn't that sweet?
Gear up and get outside.
Hey folks, today is a fun day. I am up here at my family's place for a family reunion over the 4th of July, and I just got something in the mail. I'm really excited to try it out, and I wanted to show it to you. So this is the Whiteduck 360 Regatta 13 bell tent. I'm really excited about this because while I've camped a lot and I've used a bunch of different tents and I've even used a lot of canvas tents, I've never actually used a bell tent. And I know this Whiteduck Regatta has a lot of pretty good reviews online. It's relatively, I should say, inexpensive. It's under $1,000 for this 13-foot version. But then they just released this new 360. The Regatta 360 has a couple of unique features, really one main unique feature. And you're gonna see what that is. I'm just gonna unbox it here. I'm gonna set it up because I'm gonna be sleeping in it tonight. Hope you enjoy it. I should note too, normally before I would go on a camping trip with a new canvas tent, I would season it. I did a video on that. If you haven't, you could check that out on how to season a canvas tent. But I know I'm actually gonna be in hot, sunny weather for the next week, and so I'm not too worried about that. Looks like a pretty thorough user's manual. Whole bag. That's clearly the tent. You have this. I have another Whiteduck tent, the Prota. It's more like a Kodiak Flex Bow or a spring bar tent. And I really like that they actually include this pack. They even give you a mallet. That's handy because most of them don't come with that, so in case you forget. It's rebar, galvanized rebar. And then here's your secondary stakes. They look to be galvanized as well. So I should note, I've never set this up before. I've never set up a bell tent. We're gonna see how easy it really is. Not usually big on instructions, but I'll take a quick peek. And I also don't really have a lot of preconceived notions about this tent. I've actually never watched any other reviews of it, even the regular Regatta, so this is kind of a second version of it that's got some new fancy feature. I know they're popular tents. I know it's a pretty reputable brand. These are just gonna be first impressions. This isn't some long-term review. I gotta get going. It's gonna get dark. Gotta rotate it, man, the skeeters are out tonight. So it's hard to see, but here's the door. So that's where I want it faced. Now I gotta stake it. Couple things I noticed about the stake loops. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right because it's got these elastic loops. And at first I was just a single loop. Let me show you. After I did a couple, I noticed some of them wanted to double loop. So I just kind of stuck with that, and that seemed to hold better. Contrary to my nature, I also consulted the owner's guide. And sure enough, it said you should either stake them out in a clockwise pattern or in a star pattern, kind of like you'd put a spare tire on. I didn't do that either. I went counterclockwise, but I think I got it pretty even. Oh, and then make sure those stakes are driven in at a kind of a 45-degree angle. I also wasn't sure if that little eye hook was supposed to wrap around the elastic, but it appears not. It just kind of holds it in place. Should be good. Now the poles. Those are wrapped up tight. That's kind of nice, the little chain in there to keep it together. It's got some spring to it. Clearly the center pole, definitely much bigger and thicker, much larger diameter, and has these pads. Sure, that's to protect the tent. I don't know if you can see it, but it has this little silicone cap. I think you got to pull off. Doesn't seem to fit through the grommet otherwise. There we go. Okay. I assume that when it's all staked out, that this pole here is going to be flush, kind of right here. You know, at the edge of the tent, but right now you have to kind of set it back a couple of feet. When I do that, it lets me kind of prop it up, and then once I get it all staked out, I'll come and fix it. This is where these big sort of J-hook stakes are gonna come in. I did consult the directions again, and it doesn't specify exactly how far out those stakes should be, but just from pictures and stuff I'm gathering, for how long that is, probably 4 or 5 feet. So I'm gonna try that. Maybe I'll just do a couple and start. It does say to start with the one in the center of the front door and then the 2 to either side, then work around in one direction, counterclockwise, clockwise, whatever. Just stick to one direction. Let's try that. These guy lines feel all right. They're like a polypropylene rope, so not like the super highest quality, but I'm sure they do the job. They look fine. Elastic up here, I'm sure that helps. Just everything's gonna have a little bit of spring to it, and that's gonna help in wind and weather, I'm sure. A little bit of shock absorption, so simple but clever design. That's feeling nice and taut. Now I can pull this leg out. Wow. I gotta say, I'm really impressed by how quickly it seems to have some good sturdy rigidity and structure to it. Didn't take much, just that one stake, and it already feels pretty stable. Yeah, I'm excited to check this out. This is gonna be fun. Okay, let's do the others. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. I went about maybe 4 feet out on this one, and it's not quite enough. I'm all the way at the end. I mean, it'd barely be okay, but I think you gotta go at least 5 or 6 feet out. Well, as you can see, it is pretty late. Beautiful moon tonight, almost full. It took me a little while to get this set up, but to be honest, the things that took the most time, since this is the first time I set up the tent, is uncoiling all those guy lines. That took a bit. And then there's a ton of stakes. Kind of know that going into this usually, but poles go up in a few seconds. It's the staking out that takes a little bit of time. And I had to play with it a little bit since it was my first time, figuring out how far out to get the lines staked in, the guy lines. Oh, and also the angles. So a couple of them I had them too far off, and you could see that it wasn't pitched just right. So there'd be these kind of divots or little valleys in the tent. So I was trying to avoid that, so I would move it a bit. I do wish maybe this mallet was a little bit bigger. The one that came with the proto tent I have from Whiteduck is definitely more substantial. So it just takes more wax to get a stake in with this guy. But you know, it came with it. I'm not going to complain too much. Anyway, I think I got it sorted out. Then I just got to get the cots in there and get ready to sleep. First impressions are good, but I'm gonna sleep on it and in it. So, more tomorrow. Good day, everybody. It is yesterday's tomorrow, and I just wanted to give a report after the first night in this tent. Very pleasant night, very pleasant weather. We were well equipped, so it went great. Today's another fairly hot day up here in the mountains, but it's also in the mountains, so it's not super hot. It's about 83 degrees outside. And I just wanted to show, right now I haven't opened up anything other than these windows. This has the Regatta 360, has the same 3 windows that the normal Regatta has. Wanted to give you an idea of how hot it has been inside this tent. So here's a thermometer that's been sitting in here all afternoon. So right now we're reading it right at 100 degrees. Looked at it a few times earlier, it peaked at about 102 degrees that we saw. That gives you an indication of where we're at. About low 80s outside, 100 degrees inside. Okay, that's a pretty big difference. So I'm already starting to sweat here just sitting here. But, you know, that happens in just about any tent, and I still kind of stand that canvas breathes a bit better than nylon or polyester. I know that all else the same. But windows matter and ventilation matters, and that is one of the big things about this 360 tent. Anyway, I would like to give you a little tour too. So it was just my wife and I in here last night. The kids were sleeping with their cousins. But here we've got 2 cots set up next to each other, kind of behind that post. We put a canvas tarp down, also Whiteduck. We elected to have this entryway kind of open so that we can move in and out of it and just, you know, keep the dirt at bay and things like that. We got the, actually also Whiteduck. Man, I got a lot of Whiteduck stuff here today. That's a Whiteduck dog bed. My dog loves it, and I love it because it's easy to clean. So I just purchased that one. That's a Whiteduck duffel bag. Can't remember what they call it, but it's a great deal for $32, I think I paid for it on Amazon. By the way, all these products, I will put links in the description below if you're interested. You can check those out. And if you're curious, what we got on our cots is some thick, 4-inch thick kind of self-inflating foam pads. kind of self-inflating. I still inflate them. Put just a regular sheet from home over top of that, and then a couple of quilts, because I sleep a lot better with a quilt than I do in a sleeping bag. Let me just take this opportunity to kind of mention a couple observations I noticed, things that I like and don't like. Again, these are first impressions and nothing's a deal breaker, but some things I've noticed about it. You do have this nice kind of lantern hook up here on that center post, which is great, probably even better for a lantern. We like to use these string lights. There's not really any loops or anything to attach anything to on the sides or up top. I also understand, you know, putting extra weight and stuff on that canvas can be a problem. So I see reasons why not to do it, but I was hoping I could string some lights up. So I think the best option for lighting in here is just a decent LED lantern or something to put in the middle. So it does have these vents up top. I don't know how much that's really helping, but you know, they're there, they must serve some purpose. And then I also noticed down here, last night I had that post too close to the edge, and then so it was a little too taut. And I also had that stake pulled out too much, so I actually couldn't zip the door all the way at the bottom. So what I had to do is I brought that stake in just a couple of inches to let it a little bit loose there at that threshold and move that pole back a couple inches, and now it zips up tight at the bottom, which will keep the bugs and critters out. All right, it's time to see what this Regatta 360 part is all about. So basically there are two giant zippers that go around the base. One around one side from the left side of the door to the back, the other from the right side of the door to the back. So that was one. All right, got it all unzipped. That actually went pretty quick. Now I'm going to roll everything back. I think that's gonna take a few minutes just because there's so many ties. All right, so here we are, a bit later than I anticipated waiting, but you know, here for a family reunion and got carried away doing other stuff, so I don't feel too bad about it. And besides, this isn't some scientific experiment, but it has been cooling off. Anecdotally, having that screen around the bottom, it does feel good. I mean, you definitely feel more airflow, and that, I'm sure, is the big point. Whether or not it's dramatically cooler on a really hot day in the full exposed sun, I kind of imagine it's still going to be kind of warm in there. I think it will make a difference, at least if there's a breeze. If there's no breeze, I kind of doubt it's going to make a huge difference. One, because it's relatively low and heat rises, right? So because that's all the base, it's still going to get warm, especially standing up. And I had that thermometer. Well, I guess I had it just about where the screen tops out at. So take that for what it's worth. I do think it feels better, and it looks cool, and it is pretty neat when you're inside here because you can see all the way around. I mean, check this out. You've got a great view if you're laying on the floor or you're a very small child, but I still think it's a pretty neat deal. That is the big feature. The big feature of this Regatta 360 tent is that 360-degree mesh. No-seam, fine mesh, looks to be of a good quality. It's going to keep the bugs out, give you a view everywhere if you're willing to get down on your hands and knees, and it's going to give you more airflow, and that's the big deal. I know that's one of the downsides of a bell tent as opposed to some of these others I've reviewed, like the Spring Bar or Kodiak, that have windows that are just simply higher, so you get kind of more airflow vertically. And in this tent, though, it does have those ports. It's going to vent a bit on the top, but bell tents can get kind of toasty. Oh, I will note that these down here, you know, where those windows are typically for the regular Regatta tent, there's a third layer because you got this mesh panel too. So you got to open the first mesh panel, then you have the actual canvas panel that you can peel back if the main flaps are down. That's how we'll put it at night. It's a fair amount of work to roll it up. I mean, it's not hard work, but it just takes a little bit of time. So, you know, if I'm being kind of lazy or I'm not going to be spending a lot of time at camp or in the tent, I'm probably not going to do that every day, even if it is hot out. I could see on a really warm night that probably being lovely to be able to just leave that up and have that airflow without the bugs. So it's a cool feature. All right, one other thing I wanted to address here, and again, while I haven't seen the original Regatta tent myself or used it, the main differences between the Regatta 360 and the standard Regatta, just based on the manufacturer's specifications, is one, obviously, that 360-degree screen mesh. That is the main thing. The other thing is the 360 does not come with a stove jack, whereas the regular Regatta does have a stove jack ready to go. Now, what do I think about that? I'm a big fan of hot tents, but I believe the difference here is here, this is much more of a summertime tent. You know, that screen mesh isn't going to do you any good in the winter. Even in the mid to late fall or early spring, you're probably not going to be using that feature. So if you are a fair weather or summertime camper and that's when you get outdoors, this is a great option because the hot tent thing is probably not really a necessity or even desire that you have. But if you are looking to be a 4-season camper, that might be a downside. I'm sure you could DIY it. I don't love doing that, but that would probably be an option. When I look at canvas tents in particular, there's a few things I look at and I try to evaluate apples to apples between different tents. The first is workmanship and durability. Now, this is an 8.5 ounce cotton duck canvas. It's been treated with some kind of waterproofing treatment. That's good, that's pretty standard. The stitching and stuff all looks pretty good. It's double stitched all the way around. Not the strongest I've ever seen, but it's totally sufficient and better than cheap. And then there's things like zippers and material choices, right? So these are branded Whiteduck zippers, which probably means they're just some OEM zipper. They don't feel quite as sturdy, and the bottom one that goes all the way around to roll up the bottom layer of canvas so that you can expose that mesh is that plastic teeth to teeth thing. And those can be good, but I've also had those fail on me in the past. So I think that's probably one of the weaker points is eventually, especially if you're opening and closing that every day or a lot while you're out camping or thinking about setting something like this up for an Airbnb type of situation, glamping situation, then you might run into some failure on that at some point just with a lot of use. And I guess that's to be expected. After that, ease of use, this is a pretty easy tent to use. I mean, I wouldn't say it's quite as easy as like a spring bar tent or the Whiteduck Proto for that matter, which is a similar design. Those I think just go up quicker. There's fewer stakes. This isn't really difficult, but there's just a lot of stakes and you have to kind of get the angles right, and it takes a little bit of fidgeting. I'm sure after you've set it up half a dozen times, it's going to go pretty quick. I noticed that it does take a little bit of finesse to get it upright, but I mean, there's 2 pulls. It's pretty simple. It is more compact, and I really like that about it, that there's not quite as much stuff to lug around. I mean, there's a lot of stakes, but it all fits in that bag nicely and you've got what you need. Comfort. I think it's a very comfortable tent. I think by nature of being a bell tent and having that canvas, that obviously they're not going to put a window in the side of the canvas to allow airflow up high where your head is, because that would compromise the water resistance in a rainstorm. So I wouldn't expect that in this design of a tent, but given that, I'd probably give it just a notch lower than some of those cabin tents that have windows higher up and allow more airflow through up where you are. However, obviously they did the maximum that is possible by putting that screen mesh all the way around, so you can't really complain. For the sleeping arrangements, you could sleep up to 6 in there if you do like the wheel spoke method. Everybody's feet in the middle at the pole and sticking their heads out at the side. It might be a little cramped, but you could totally do it with gear spread throughout. Just 2 of us is nice. I mean, you saw how it was set up. We had room for chairs. Because it's more of a circle or polygonal shape, your gear's going to go around the outside or stuff it under the cots like we do. So you're going to have some wasted space. It's not the most efficient shape of a tent, but it's cool looking. I'll also say, as far as like ambient light in there during the daytime when it's sunny, it's not a super light tan color and it's not a super dark one. So I think it's a good compromise. You get a decent amount of light in there, but it's not absorbing all the heat by being too dark. As far as features go, it's not like it has a ton of features. The main feature is the 360-degree panorama mesh. You do have a couple of pockets for a little bit of gear or books or flashlights, things like that. Nothing revolutionary, but it's handy. It does have that lantern or that light hanger right up on the center post. They do have a couple add-on accessories I don't have, like there's a canopy or an awning you can attach to it and put out in front, a ground sheet. That's great. One other thing about the materials is that floor, they call it a polyurethane or a PU layer. I think it's only 7.5 ounces. It's like a tarp. It's like one of those blue tarps or kind of basic green tarps. It's a little bit better than that, a little bit finer weave, but it's not phenomenal. It's not like the polyvinyl you find in the Whiteduck Proto tent, so it's not a super thick rubber raft type. It's gonna keep most of the water out, but if you're gonna be on any kind of rough terrain, I probably would want to have a ground sheet under it just because it's not quite as tough or durable, and it's gonna be a little bit harder to repair than that thicker polyvinyl material you see in some others like this. Then I like to talk about versatility when it comes to canvas tents. This is relatively versatile, especially for fair weather campers or mid-spring to mid-fall. If you're gonna be doing any kind of winter camping, it's gonna hold up, I think, really well in the wind. I think it will shed rain well. I do need to season it. I'd feel better about it. I could see some light coming through some of the seam holes. And I'd say it's relatively versatile, although it is kind of big in an odd shape, so you're not going to be able to get it on every tent pad and every campground. So I'd probably give it half points or like a 3 out of 5 on versatility. Summer camping or any kind of long-term camp out, family reunions like I'm doing now, it's kind of fantastic. And then there's price. So this lists at the time of filming at $890 for the 13-foot Regatta 360 tent. That is a reasonable price. I wouldn't say it's cheap. I wouldn't say it's overly expensive. There are a whole lot of canvas tents and things that are much more expensive than that. I think it's a decent value. It's actually right on par with a Whiteduck Proto of a similar area. However, the area in there being round isn't quite as efficient for packing sleepers and gear in my opinion, but it's still a lot of fun. Relative to other tents of this nature, I think that's actually a very good deal. You find other bell tents that are made out of canvas, they're either going to be really low quality and a little bit cheaper than this, or they're going to be really good quality but quite a bit more expensive, maybe double or triple what this is. So I think it's a reasonable price. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. One thing I do like about it is just that 360-degree view. That is a pretty cool and unique feature. It's handy, it does let some airflow in, and it's just kind of fun to hang out. My kids have already been playing in there all day and they enjoy it. Another thing I like is that it has just enough organizational capacity to be useful, but it doesn't overdo it with a bunch of random doodads and hangers. And as it's really my first experience with a bell style tent, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a great glamping experience. My darn dogs. As far as a couple of things I'm not a huge fan of, I think they could have added a little bit better floor. I would really love to see that polyvinyl floor in there. And I'd say the same thing for the zippers. It'd be nice if that was just a notch up in quality. But again, for the price, I think it fits. Those are the sorts of things that you find in more premium, more expensive products. One other thing I really like is the Whiteduck ecosystem. Now, as you can see, I've collected a few different Whiteduck products, from their canvas bags to their dog bed to a couple of tents. I just think they make good quality products, and turns out there's some of the ones that I use over and over again. I wish they had that stove jack in there. That would make it really a true 4-season tent, I believe. You could still use it all winter long. Don't love the idea of having to have 2 tents, one summer, one winter, if you're gonna do that year round. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody, so I think there's still a use here, but the downside of the regular regatta is the one that it can get really hot. Then you're left with a tent that's gonna be great in the winter, but maybe a little too hot in the summer, so you might end up going with something else in the summer anyway. I like their shock absorbing system. Now, they advertise this on their website, I noticed, and it's very simple, but it's essentially these elastic bungees on every other tie where you actually hook or tie the guy line to stake out. And I noticed when it got pretty windy this afternoon, not crazy windy, but a little bit, the tent moves, and that's okay. So I think that's a pretty effective way to probably keep from putting too much stress on thread or canvas itself, to avoid having seams split or, you know, those little loops get pulled out of the fabric. I think that's a clever and simple way to solve that problem. All right, folks, that's it. Thanks for taking a first look at this with me. If you're interested in this particular tent and you want to see a long-term review down the road, let me know in the comments, and hopefully can give you more information that you're looking for. We do a lot of gear reviews like this on the channel. In fact, I recommend, if you're looking for canvas tents and you're not quite sure what to get yet, you check out my best canvas tents review. If you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button for me. If you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel, because there will be a lot more coming in the future. Now gear up and get outside.